I am Dr. Mohammad Rafi, Associate Professor, Department of Cybersecurity at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I want to discuss about network, the programming and management, in which the topic is Getsocket and Setsocket the functions. Getsocket and Setsockets are not standard function in a network the programming, but this can be, we can utilize it as a customized the functions. That's why now we can call it as custom utility functions. These two functions are custom utility functions. So generally it is utilized, Getsocket, Setsockets can be utilized in a socket the programming at client side and at server side. By using this Getsocket and Setsocket the functions, now we can simplify the process of creating the socket and configurations and managing the sockets. If you take Getsocket as a function, the Getsocket as a function can be, so it is a thought of a utility function which handles the socket as the creations and initial the setups of a socket. It can include generally creating the socket, binding the socket. It should be the address and a port number. Here, if it is Getsocket as a function, if it is acting as a server, the connecting to it a remote address and the port. When it is connecting to remote address and port means here, if it is acting as a client, if it is acting as a server now, which is binding it to the address and port number of a server. Setsocket function. Setsocket as a function can be, it is a thought of a utility function now, which is the configure various socket the options. Generally, this can include setting timeout, enabling, disabling the socket options like address reuse and other configurations if it is necessary for the socket the proper the operations by using Setsocket functions. Here, Getsocket and Setsocket. From that Getsocket, it is a simplifies the creation of the socket and installation of the socket, which handles Getsocket now, which is handling the server, client and the configurations. Setsockets. Setsocket now, which is a straightforward approach, which is applying common configurations to a socket such as timeout and socket options. These custom utility functions, that means Getsocket and Setsocket, are the custom utility functions which helps to hiding the information and simplifying the common the tasks in a network the programming by using Getsocket and Setsockets, which makes the code are more readable and maintainable by using these Getsocket and Setsocket functions. Here, Getsocket and Setsockets mainly which manipulating the options that will be associated with the socket options. These options, socket options that may be exist at a multiple levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, number of levels. These multiple levels now we can call it as a protocol levels. Generally, these are the protocols can be framed on multiple levels with a set of rules and regulations. Here, generally, always now these Getsocket or Setsockets are present at the uppermost socket levels. And whenever now we are manipulating these get socket and set socket, these options at the levels at which the option which resides on the name of the option must be specified. Here it can be manipulated. Get socket and set socket should be the manipulated options at the socket levels, high level, low level, medium level. At the socket levels only it will be manipulated. Here is the level generally in get socket, set socket, the function calling. The level can be specified as SOL underscore socket. That is, SOL means here socket level. SOL means socket level underscore that particular socket. Here is for manipulate options at any other level that the protocol. Now whatever the protocols we have designed, that is a protocol number of a appropriate protocol controlling at levels that can be simplified. That can be simplified and setting the sockets. For example, if you take these socket options is to be interpreted by the TCP protocol. So that means socket level should be set to the protocol number of the TCPs. That parameters opt value, that is a option value or opt length. These two parameters can be used as a option values for set socket and get socket functions. By using these opt value and opt length, option value and option length, now we can identifying a buffer. Get socket option, it is identifying a buffer in which the value for the requested the options are to be returned. Here, get socket, so this option length, the value result of the parameter. Now, actually, which is initially which is containing the size of the buffer. So, size of the buffer that should be pointed by the parameters. That is a optional value parameter which will be the pointed, and that can be modified on returns, which indicating the actual buffer size, and based on this the actual the buffer size of the value can be returned. Depends upon the buffer size, whatever the values now we are storing in the buffer, based on that the buffer values now we are returning the values. Here we can return the values by using this get socket the function and set socket the function. Mainly here get socket the function can be used for getting the information from the buffer. Set socket now generally we can use for setting the time for client and server, and the communication the time will be set by using the set socket. Time option will be set. If no options, no optional values are is to be applied or returned by using the set socket or get socket other functions. Here is the parameter opt value parameter. It may be the null. Opt name and the specified the options are paused and interpreted to the appropriate the protocol modules for interpretation. Here is now these sockets levels, high level, low level, medium level. These socket level options generally in get socket and set socket the functions now generally we are utilizing as a int parameter for opt values. For set socket the function calling, the parameter, whatever the parameters now we are using with help of the set socket, now that should be the non-zero to enable a boolean other options, or a 0 if the option is to be the disabled. Return values. On the success, 0 is written. That means here the get the sockets and set sockets, the functional the calling are successful. If it is get socket, retrieve the data successfully from the buffer, and set socket, if it is setting the time for the communication to client to the server. Now if it is a successful, now we are returning the 0. Otherwise here, if any error is happened, now -1 is the returned. Here error number is set the appropriately. So this is about the return values. Successful based on the return values. Now we are setting it as 0 or -1. 0 means successful. Successful operations are performed by using set socket and get socket. -1 is error, unsuccessful operations performed. -1, if it is written the -1 means by using this the function or the calling, unsuccessful operations will be performed. So this is a -1 indicates. Here is some of the tags can be utilized in a get socket and set socket functions are EBADF. So this argument now, whenever you are using this BAD, the file, the error bad file argument, now whenever you are using this argument is not a valid descriptor. This is not a, this is the file, whatever the file now we are using, this is not a valid file descriptor. E fault, that means FAULT, E fault, error on fault. Here error on fault, the address pointed to by optional value is not in a valid part of the process address space. For get socket the option, this error may also be returned if optional length is not in a valid part of the process address the spaces. Here is EINVAL, that means invalid value, error on invalid value. Here is optional length, that is invalid in a socket in set socket optional function calling. And ENO proto option, proto opt. Here is this option is unknown at the level of the indicator, at the level of the indicated level. What are the level? Number of levels, at which level now we are indicating, at which level now the sockets are communicating, the sockets are the activating or utilizing. That is the option is unknown at the level of the indication. And E not socket, that means here this argument, that is socket S is a file, not a socket. Here is the E not sock. So this argument. So next to the get socket functions. The get socket the functions can be used to get the properties of the socket interface or of a single socket S via the OPT name, optional name, OPT value and OPT length are the parameters. By using this the parameters that can get the properties. We are getting the properties that is optionals, the optional properties, optional from the optional other socket. Now we'll get the properties from the system. Here is now set socket function. Set socket function can be used to set the properties of the socket interface or of a single socket yes via the OPT name, OPT value, OPT length parameters. By using this one now we are setting the properties and getting the properties from the system by using get socket optional function and set socket optional function. Here is now by using the level parameters, that is high level, low level, medium level, the number of the level parameters. So OPT, the parameters generally we are saying it as a OPT name, OPT value. So level parameters. These are level parameters now which is specified whether you want to get or set the options of a socket the interface of a single socket. Here is now The current values for the levels, single levels are generally in a socket. The different the tagging values can be utilized based on the level. Here, SOQ, socket level, global. That means debugging outputs are enabled. And socket length socket. So it is get or set the options of a socket S of the address family INET or address family INET version 6 address the family. And next level, next value, next value at a level means SOQ transport. Next tag value is SOQ transport, socket length transport. Here is the socket length the transport now which is get or set options of the socket S of the address family international standard organization address the family here. And internet the protocol IP proto TCP. Internet Protocol Transmission Control Protocol. Now it is get and set options of the socket. For both now we are using get and set. Get function and set function. The options can be utilized in this by using these the tag values. These are all the tag values. Now we can other utilize here. So socket yes in the address IF INET or AF INET 6 address family. Now by using these address of the families now we can modifying the protocol behavior of the TCP protocol. IP proto IPv4 get or set the options of the socket S in the AF INET the address of the family for modifying the protocol behavior of IPv4 of the protocols. Here, so this is the reason of the compatibility. Both the IP proto IP and IP proto IPv4 are evaluated. Next, IP proto ICMP v6. ICMP v6 it is a query or modified option for the sockets in the address of the family AF underscore INET version 6 of the type of sock underscore raw mode. Now we are using the raw mode for modifying the protocol behaviors. Whatever the protocols you are using, now we can modify the protocol the behavior in this I proto ICMP B the 6 of the IP protocol. So in a the conjunction with the so it is a ICMP v6 the protocol. Here is our next the value is a options for the SOQ global level. Here is options for the SOQ global level. The operand S. So here it is a meaningless, and that should be assigned the value 0. That means option name is yes socket the debug now which is enabling the debugging outputs. Debugging outputs now whenever run the server and client here. Though if is there any other debugs, if is there any errors while communicating while transferring the data, now we are once if it is enabled that errors now we are getting the errors. What type of the errors are debug? What type of the errors are displayed? With the various depth of the details to be enabled. Here is now the function Getsocket, the option function. These functions and option the length with the value of the 4. That means size of the integer. 4 the bytes size of the value is the 4. The value of the debugging the output, which the level is the currently we are setting is output in a optional socket optional value parameter. Here is the value parameter is a 0. For socket value the parameter is 0, which is disabling the debugging output. If it is 1, the get socket the optional value which is enabling the debugging output. Debugging output once if it is enable the debugging output now we'll get the errors. while communicating from client to the server with the help of this Getsocket and set the socket. The errors while operating these the functions now, debugs will be disabled. Debugs will be disabled if the value is 0. If the value is a 1 here, the debugs will be enabled at the output now. So which shows the errors, which shows the what the errors are arised at different the levels. Based on that, the errors now we can rectify that the errors. The programmers, developers are rectify that errors and after rectifying the errors, retransmitting the data. Generally, these set socket and optional length with a value of 4. Here is the debugging output level. Now if you we can see in the table, this debugging output level here is greater than or equals to 1 while calling the other function. Here is no, we are not considering the any additional information or binary content addressable other memory parameters. Any parameters are any information not included if it is greater than or equals to function. Suppose here the pointing option value, socket option value, if it is a greater than or equals to 6 while calling the other function. Now we are including the additional the information. And here is there is no binary content addressable memory for this one. And the pointing whenever we are pointing this optional value that is equals to 8 function calling the optional the value while calling the function by using the get the socket and set socket. If it is a pointing optional value is 8, here is the binary content addressable the parameters are utilized after calling the get socket and set socket other functions. And here is the optional value if it is a 9. Here is the additional information we are using and bcam binary content addressable and the memory parameters also this area we are utilizing after the calling the get socket and set socket. Here also now we are utilizing the parameter area. So before calling we are using, after calling. If it is optional value is 9, the both before calling, after the calling now, we are using the binary and the content addressable memories. So by using this the binary address content addressable memories here, with the help of that address now, the content can be retrieved by using get socket. And here set socket means here the set socket, what happened means now we are setting the time limiter. How much time is required for getting the information from the buffer, from the memory, addressable other memory. So that's why the addressable memory, that's why now we are using the star opt value. Star opt value is 9. Here is both the before the calling, after the calling, now binary content addressable memory can be utilized. And here in this set socket option and option name. So asynchronous and optional length if it is equals to 4 and optional value with the pointer to the short or ID of the event ID will be utilized. And external waiting point of view. So it will be the configured it as a socket that the port number is BS2000 will be the configured as a the port the number that is a socket option, set socket option, get socket option here. Now whenever it is configured, now we are utilizing BS2000 when this is the first socket call of the subsystem. Now set socket the option that can be modified the socket option. Here is now you can see option name is asynchronous, that is a socket is in asynchronous mode, not at a time will happen. That is in this asynchronous mode of the communication, socket option length is equals to 4 and value range of the optional the socket is pointer to the short ID of the event ID. So this will be considered while communicating the information from the server and the client. And here the options for the SOL socket length, the sockets in address of the family INET and address family INET version 6 are the levels. In these are the levels now, while whenever now we are utilizing here the options are in this case generally specify the socket. Here the specific the socket option will be consider by considering the specific socket the option. Now we are retrieving the data and setting the time interval for performing the operations. Here and option name, socket option name in this one, socket option name, which specify the name of the option for which the value is to be retrieved or setting. That means here the value is retrieving from the memory, the buffer, or setting the time limit within this the time limit. Now we have to retrieve like this. Now we are setting the time. Here is with the Getsocket as a function call. Now the opt value as a parameter and opt length as a parameter. These two parameters in a Getsocket as an option. Now it can be identify the respective buffer in a system. That means here with this in this respective buffer only we are getting the data, or we are setting the some time limit in which here the values of the desired the option that can be returned from the memory. Here is the pointer, the optional socket length generally initially which contain the size of the buffer to which the opt value parameter now will be pointed. Whenever it is the pointed, now we are getting the values from the memory by calling Getsocket the function which returns 0. That means successfully retrieving the data from the socket. For example, here star opt length now which is containing the content size of the return the buffer. If the option the question, that means the socket option which question has no values, that can be returned star optional opt value. The parameter which is the value is 0, successfully performed. The operations successfully completed, which indicates the operation successful completion. Here is some of the other values that can be returned by the Getsocket the option for the option name and option length in the address the family INET and address family INET version 6. Here the address from this address families are the option names are socket debugging, SO debug, SO dish alias, and so error, so keep alive, so linger. These are all the optional names. The length, the optional length is a 4, and size of the struck linger, and output format in a optional value is a int. Now the type of this optional value, it is a integer type, debugging integer type, and this is the error also integer type, and keep alive also integer type, and the output of the format optional value, socket optional value. So it is a structured the type pointing struck here. So linger, here is now pointing the structure. That means a struck linger, star struck linger. Here if you see output buffer, now the value length value is a 4. All the length values so SO RCV buff, SO that means receiving buffer, sending buffer, timestamp, and TST pad, and type of the sockets, level of the sockets, whatever what type you are using at what level. So all are the value is a 4 except who stand the value socket who stand value. That means here we host, we host anything will be considered as a we host. Here destination or the host. That means now we are saying it as a we host any 8. The length is 8. So it is a character or the type. Character or the type. And set socket functions. While using the set socket as the functions now can be whenever now we are using the set socket as a function to set or changing the values via the opt value and opt length parameters. Now you can specify the opt the name and opt length, opt value, that is a optional value, optional length, optional name, optional length, optional the value in inet AF underscore inet family and AF address family, AF inet 6 version 6 address the family. Here is the name is SO broadcast, that is the only, so it is a AF inet family. Length is 4. There is no optional value for this one. And the optional name is a so debug. The optional length value is a 4. So which is optional the value. Length is a 4. Optional value which is lies in between the 0 and 9. And here is the valid value range of the socket option value for the so keep alive option is 0 to 120 up to dash 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 3 to 767. If the valid value is a 0, the timer is switched off. If the value is in the range of 120 to 32767, the timer is switched on and the timer interval is set with the specified value, unit of the measurement. Now in terms of the seconds. If a value outside the valid range is specified, the timer interval is set with the default value of the transport system. Here is in a so broadcast only it is a AF inet. Now if you take this broadcast, this option has no functional meaning for the sockets. Only a syntax check is performed here. If the syntax is valid, the value is 0. The value 0 is written. Otherwise, which returns the -1. Debug also. The level is equals to SOL socket length global. Here this option which defines the debugging level for the socket of the active task. And if level is equals to SOL socket, this option has a no functional significances. Only a syntax check is performed. If the syntax is valid, the value 0 is returns. Otherwise, which returns the -1. So error. So shown the number of the lost errors issued. Whatever the errors are issued, that can be shown by using these options. GetSocket as a function could be used to retrieving the configured or ready to use as a socket. Here is generally the getSocket as a function now which is involved creating the socket, setting the options and possibly connecting or binding it to an address and the port. Advantages of this getSocket as a function are encapsulation. That means here this getSocket as a function which encapsulates the details of the sockets, creation, configurations and making the main code the clearance and more readable. So this is one advantage. And reusability of the getSocket as a function is now which is centralizing the socket initialization logic and making it is a reusable across the different other parts of the applications. And error handling now which is centralizes the error handling during the socket the creation and configuration, which ensuring the consistency, error the management. The configuration management. configuration management here, which manages and update the socket options, like that means timeout, buffer size in one place, reducing the risk of the inconsistencies. Here is the conceptual set socket as a function. Next advantage, the set the socket function could be used to apply the configurations and setting the existing sockets. It might involve setting socket option, configuring timeouts, enabling, disabling certain features, and modularity. Set socket modularity is a advantage of the set socket. So set socket in modularity, which allow the separation of the socket the creation from socket the configuration, and making the code more modular and easier to maintaining. So this is the advantage of the set socket. It is a modularity and consistency. Here ensures set socket which ensures the consistent applications of a configuration across the different sockets, and which set socket which is reducing the micro configurations likelihood. Flexibility, set socket which enabling dynamic reconfiguration of sockets at a runtime based on the what are the applications now we are using, and application requirements or network other conditions. The flexibility will be considered as one of the advantage of set socket. And a simplified code which reduce the retrieved code for setting the socket options. Now which is simplifying the overall code base. Overall code base can be simplified by using the set the socket. Some of the examples of the in real time some of the examples by using the get socket and set socket the functions in a network programming are, so that is a real time chart client. In a real time chart client now, so it is a one example. Real time game server is a another example. That means the get socket set socket in real time utilized in a gaming server that can be utilized. And streaming clients, live streaming clients also now we can utilize the get socket and set socket. And functional trading clients, IoT device other connections. So these are all the real time applications of get socket and set socket. Here the conclusion of get socket and set socket here. These are the functions get socket and set socket functions in a network the programming and management, which has a great simplification of the socket management by encapsulating the socket creation and configuration, which promoting the code reusability and ensuring that the consistency in a socket setting. These approaches which makes the code base cleaner, more modular and easier to maintain, especially in a larger applications. Here the references, so these are all the references. Richard Steven, Unix Network Programming, this is the textbook Pearson Education, and Subramanian Network Management Principles and Practices. It is a references for get socket and set socket the functions, and these are the textbooks and reference books. Internetworking with TCP IP, and William Styling SNMP MP V2 SNMP V3. So these are all the textbook and web references. This is about the get socket and set socket references, textbook references and web references.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.